Welcome to your first video to help you through designing your plans book. Many of these tips can also be utilized in your presentation, so keep that in mind. This first recording is all about early design decisions, and this video is the same for both printed and digital folks. So you can see I have InDesign open here, and this is showing you the fictional brand that I'm going to be working with in demonstrating. So this is Brightside Collective, and it is a student-focused lifestyle brand that promotes mental wellness, balance, and everyday joy on campus. So all of your design decisions should be informed by the brand concept and the brand personality. So in this case, the brand personality is optimistic, supportive, modern, authentic, inclusive. And so I want to think about those things as I make my choices. So our first decisions will be color, fonts, and graphics. So let's get into how we can make those decisions. We're going to start with Adobe Fonts. So with my brand, one of the things I wanted to look for was something friendly and modern. So in Adobe Fonts, and I'm logged in to my Creative Cloud account, that way these fonts will show up everywhere. I'm going to browse all my fonts. And I love how Adobe Fonts organizes by tags. So look, there's my friendly. And I can start looking through those. Maybe I also want to look at rounded fonts. So let's say I really like this. One of the things I'm noticing is that there's 10 fonts. So let's click the headline here and start looking. Now here's the sample text, but I can change that. So a great tip is type some of your keywords in to see what it looks like. So I think this is a fun font, and I can click add to add everything, or I can choose specific fonts and add them. Now notice as I hover, I get the option to try an Adobe Express. So if you are doing digital content, you can do that. Now let's say you don't have necessarily a keyword in mind. You can still search by classification. So maybe you want a sans serif and you want it kind of medium weight. There's another set of fonts for you. So Adobe Fonts is a great place to start, and I might pick a few different fonts because what I want to do as I'm choosing fonts, and we'll go back to InDesign, is really think about how they're going to look. So for my first one, I might be comparing several different fonts. And then I'm going to compare the font I've selected in some different sizes and in some different lettings. I'll do the same thing with my headline or my editorial fonts. So I've selected several, played with what I think is best, and I've printed everything. Oftentimes our screens lie to us just a little bit, so I always advise adding content and then printing it. So now that we've got some fonts selected, let's go look at color. So again, we'll go to the web, and this time we're going to Adobe Color. So all of these can be synced just like fonts all across your Adobe tools, including in Express. I'm going to go ahead and close that down, and I'm going to start with creating color themes. Now, over here on the right-hand side, this is what's called a Creative Cloud library, and I highly suggest that you create one for your campaign's work. So to create one, I would just hit that plus, enter my name. I already have Plansbook examples selected, and so I'm going to start creating my design here. Creating my color. So when you are picking colors, a good rule of thumb is to have a light, a dark, and 2 or 3 accent colors, okay? So I always like to start with, okay, what's my main color? So for Bright Side Collective, I knew I wanted a really bright color, and so I went with a bright yellow as kind of my base color. So that is the bright yellow that I wanted to start with. So my other colors are going to be built around that. Now, one of the things to think about as you're building your palette is just because they are all together doesn't mean that they work together, okay? So if I used these 5 colors as my branding colors, I have low contrast, I don't have color pops that I can use, and I definitely don't have that light and dark. It's always interesting to explore these different type of color harmonies, but you may have to be more exacting in your choices, okay? But this is a great place to get started on what you might want. And if you find a combination you want to explore, you can go ahead and save that to your library. Another great way to explore is by looking at keywords. So I want bright, optimistic, again, pulling those keywords, modern. So this is an interesting one. I like that. Might be some good accent colors there. And I can add that to my library. So I've downloaded some colors, and now I'm ready to do the same thing I did with fonts with my colors. So the way I get started with that is I just create swatches and start testing. Now, in my preference, I always like my light and my dark to not necessarily be pure white and pure black. So I have a creamish color for my light and like a dark gray for my black. This is my main color, and then I've just added 2 accent colors. So all of these can be used in combination with each other, and they work because the values of the saturation and brightness are very similar. Now let's take a peek over at my CC library, and we'll get to all these graphics in a second. So here are the colors that we added from Adobe Color. And if I wanted to move those into my swatches panel, I can just right-click and add my theme to swatches. And there's all those colors. So I can say, pull out specific colors and use those and kind of combine a few different palettes. When I'm done, I can just delete any color that I'm not going to use. So now that we've looked at fonts and colors, let's get into graphics. And the key to defining your graphic voice is to find elements that work with your brand that can be easily repeatable. So I'm going to go through some examples I pulled. First thing I notice with a brand are what are some things I can pull out. So this parallelogram, That's an interesting shape. Kind of repeated here with that laptop. And I like the idea of combining that kind of really angled look with something a little more organic. So this is just a highlight line. I could use a shape for that. I could do a pen or pencil tool for that. Just a really cool idea. So that's my first page, and here's how that would translate into other designs. So I kind of took that parallelogram and changed it to triangles and popped in a red for my subhead. Now that highlight red is under my logo. Here's the same kind of idea, but now I've added a few different triangles. And now I've added some circles. So you can see I've started with the base company logo and I pulled some shapes. Now this logo has some other shapes I could pull. I'm noticing it has that N with the curved tops and bottoms, so I could do some curved rectangles or an angled line. Same thing, we've got a logo here, and I've already pulled out a color pop. So notice right away I've got my light, my dark, and one accent color. Now for this, I'm going to be really inspired by these shapes that I'm seeing in this logo. So again, pulling that logo over, keeping that accent line. And here, I'm adding that shape in, mindful of that building. So that gives you a few ideas. Now, for my brand, I wanted to think about really organic shapes that I could create. So of course I went into Illustrator for this. And I had a few basic ideas on what I wanted to do. And you can see my logos are also here. So I wanted a series of these organic shapes that I could use as background elements, as ways to anchor. There's my little highlight. That could go behind a subhead. And I've not only used my 3 different colors, but I've also decided to add an effect to these. So I added just a little bit of a grain to these, which kind of just creates a little extra bit. Now, a few of these I've not added grain to. So this is going to be one of my background kind of highlight things. That does not have an effect, nor does the star shape. My other element, again, because this is a student brand, we're talking mental health, we're talking awareness around that, is the idea of using some fun sticker-like icons. So I created those, and I created those in our 3 colors. Once I get those created, I can copy and paste things over to InDesign, or what I did was add them all into my library. And so I have every single coral graphic, every single blue graphic, and every single yellow graphic in here. And so to add graphics, all you need to do is click this plus and then graphic. And it takes it a little while to load. But when it's loaded and I hop over to InDesign, I can just drag that graphic out and have that usable. And what is that file coming in as? It's literally coming in as an Illustrator file. Now, many of the time, if you copy and paste from Illustrator, you can change the fill. I can't do that because of that grain. So if I didn't have that grain on my objects, I could literally just copy and paste. Now, there are a lot more graphics here. I went a little crazy than you will probably need, but I wanted to give you an idea of how you can utilize all of those graphic elements together. So just like I have print tested my fonts and my colors, I want to print test my graphics. So at this point of the game, I am 100% ready to get started building my actual plans book. I've made all the decisions ahead of time, and now I know what I'm going to be using. So in our next video, we'll talk about how you can set up styles, set up your documents, and set up swatches. Hop over there.